Good evening, all. You can't see anything from up here. um, it's fantastic that so many people could come out tonight. I mean, I had a small part to play in sort of putting this together, and we really had no idea how it would work in Edinburgh. I knew that there was a lot of adventurous sorts here, and that there was certainly a lot of great adventures in the area to tell the stories. So it's just great that it's worked out and that you've come to support it so well. What I was going to do is, in, 6 minutes, race around the world and go from top to bottom. But because Scott Napier did such a good job of slagging me off, and also in talking about what it took to do the cycle, I'll concentrate on the mountains that I was climbing on my second big expedition, and leave the cycling bit to which he did much faster. The photos which you've already seen sort of tell the story of what it took to get started on the world cycle. I left university 5 years ago with the dream of breaking the Guinness World Record to go around the globe. And my route would take me from Paris, 18,000 miles around the world, back to Paris. And the known bit was Europe. I'd pedaled through it quite a few times. I'd done about 10 years of amateur expeditions from the age of 12 to 22. And it was at that age, during university, that I committed to trying to take on my biggest dreams and make documentaries about it. So the world record for the world was the first one. The record stood at 276 days, and my idea was to really set that at a whole new level, to try and really put that on the map as a really coveted event. Some of the photos here are going through one of the hardest parts. Out of Europe, I was doing pretty good time, but then through the countries of Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, India, I knew it would be a much, much bigger challenge. In terms of the documentary, some of the most interesting parts, the really different cultures, people and places, I headed into these parts. That's a photo there from India, and really worried about what the welcome would be like. But I have to sort of report that, especially in places like Iran, place I was most fearful of, the welcome was quite wonderful. But people would talk about even their neighbors within Iran with fear. You know, they would tell me how dangerous things were, just like I'd heard back in the Western world. And it was very strange to sort of hear that and carry on down the road and meet more people who would turn around and tell you the same stories about people that live back up the road. It's dangerous, they're animals, they're awful. And I think the more you travel, certainly at the speed of a bike, seeing the world in that kind of detail, the more you realize that people really are the same the world over. And it's even if you're trying to go as fast as you can, you see just incredible sort of detail, the hospitality of people absolutely everywhere. Things didn't go so well by the time I got across Australia and then up across America. I thought that would be the easy half of the world. I thought the first 9,000 miles were all the tough countries. In fact, the second 9,000 miles to the finish was what really tested me. Across Australia, I had an incredible headwind, and that photo you just saw there was the worst day of the cycle. It was a crash in Louisiana, followed by being mugged in the same day in the evening. So you get run over at lunchtime, and then you get your camera gear and your valuables taken in the evening. Not a fantastic day. Getting back on the bike, just keeping going, was everything I could think of at that point. The sense of momentum is sort of your obsession, because stopping is just the worst feeling. Finishing and getting the world record was the big dream, and then I had the chance to sort of relive the journey by writing about it, reflecting on it, and then start to focus on the next big adventure I wanted to go on. And I was going to leave the record breaking for Scott on this one, because after racing around the world, I thought the journey down the Americas should be something very different. I wanted to explore more of the cultures. I didn't want to just race through as fast as I could, but I thought the chance was to follow the mountains, the Rockies and the Andes, top to toe, and climb its highest peaks in north and south. So that was a very different challenge. Of course, you've got a time schedule because you've got to get to the mountains within their short climbing season. And for me, I'd sort of overlooked in this big dream the fact that I wasn't much of a climber. I hadn't even climbed Ben Nevis before. I've still not climbed Ben Nevis. My first major climb was going to be Denali in Alaska. And so whilst I had over a year to plan for the world and put that together, I had about 3 months from the go-ahead from the BBC to actually get to the start of this major expedition. And Denali was incredibly tough. I mean, there's some very experienced climbers in the audience who will turn around and say that this is not a massively technical mountain. But for an amateur, for somebody just taking on a dream, going into the mountains for the first time, it's incredibly tough. This is life in the freezer. We had some really bad storms, as you can see. And I sort of faced up some pretty bad accidents, sort of witnessed some things happening on that mountain, which really made me sort of put into perspective the risks that you do take on. You know, you try and minimize them as much as you can. But seeing people, unfortunately, paying the ultimate price for taking on those dreams does put into pretty sharp perspective, you know, why you do these things. what was odd about this journey was that I had a big climb in a team in Alaska for 3 weeks. And at the end of that climb, for the rest of the team, that was it over. Mission accomplished. But for me, I jumped on my bike and I had half a year to get through North, Central and South America to the second mountain, to Aconcagua in Argentina. And if you look at the stats, if you're a betting person, you wouldn't bet on this expedition. Both Denali and Aconcagua have got relatively low summit success rates. Your chance of being able to get to the top of both at first attempt was certainly far from likely, well less than 40%. So the idea of climbing one, spending half a year on the bike to get to the next one, and then trying to climb the second, I had no idea physically if I could do that. And it was such a different focus because rather than just being completely tunnel-visioned racing around the world, this time I was trying to share the story as much as I could with people online, on the radio, on TV as I went. You know, I was on Radio 1 every week doing BBC Breakfast, lots of feeds. And if you've been involved in blogging your adventures, sharing the story as you go, you'll know how much time that takes. You know, that balance between doing the adventure and sharing the adventure becomes quite critical. But, of course, it's moments like this which just make it all incredibly worth it. That is the shadow of Aconcagua. I'm on summit day, and the great mountain above me, the highest peak outside of Asia, and moving up towards the top. We had some pretty bad storms again, and well, I think one thing on the mountains is you always believe that it doesn't matter how tough it is on the way up, it'll be worth it, because when you get to the top, it'll just be fairy tale, blue skies, and you'll see a view for hundreds of miles. I summited both Denali and Aconcagua in an absolute blizzard, and I can tell you, on both occasions, my greatest wish was to be anywhere else. It's not until a long time later that you sort of reflect and look back and sort of think that was absolutely worth it and quite incredible. It's not an enjoyable place for a human being to be at that altitude with so little oxygen. And then a final 2,000 miles back on my bike through the headwinds of Patagonia down to the finish. And that was around the world and top to bottom in 7 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed a little bit about what it took to take on those adventures. And like all the other guys have mentioned this evening, the biggest part of taking on your dreams is just simply committing to them. Good luck, and thank you very much.